So before I think I get started, I just want to make a note that I've been an avid football player, and I was a football player from a very young age. And I think more often than not, sports is a great equalizer in ways that we don't often recognize it to be. And I grew up playing in the streets in Islamabad. I grew up in a middle class family. But two of the best strikers on my team, their names were Nadeem and Wasim. They helped us win many tournaments. But I remember when we reached seventh grade, both of them suddenly disappeared. And just like a good team manager does, I went out looking for them. I didn't find them in their school. I didn't find them in their home. Instead, I found them with their dad working in their father's workshop. And I think that this for me was especially in seventh, eighth grade, I think it's a really odd thing to come to face with. Pakistan has 23 million children who are out of school, but about 2.3 million of them have to start working at a very young age. Um, that's about 1 in 10 uh, of children aged 10 to 14, and 13% of kids who are aged 10 to 17 who start working at a very young age. I think for me, that was an unacceptable status quo. Many people say that's normal, that has to happen. But just around that time, I think we were all graduating from high school. There is a predictable formula. You go to college, you graduate from college, you start saving money, you buy a car, you get a mortgage. But I didn't want to do that. And so I refused to go to college. And instead, I took whatever money I had and went to the slums and built a school. The school used to run in the evenings. It used to start at 5 p.m. and then it used to go on till 8 p.m. And there were 70 kids who used to come to the school. They didn't pay anything except their curiosity. And all of these were kids like Nadeem and Wasim, my two friends from the football team. Um, and the hypothesis, the rebellion was that these kids deserved an equal chance and could flourish as well. Now, 14 years later, there was a kid named Haroon, his namesake, but he was the hardest kid to teach. When I was just 18, I just set up a slum school. I was teaching him. He drove he drove my patience really thin. Um, but 14 years later, he works as like a full stack data engineer at our company, building out solutions that serve millions of children across Pakistan. I couldn't have imagined how all of this would flow, but I think it convinces me that there is incredible potential, um, and that childhood should never be collateral damage in the economics of poverty. I think that's a rebellion. I often think about rebellion in my head, it's a massive act that you do in defiance. But I've come to realize that oftentimes rebellion is a tiny, tiny choice that you make. And I think over time, if you keep on repeating that choice, it snowballs. Um, I built one school, then I started teaching in public schools. What started out with one classroom became 10 classrooms and 20 classrooms. Then he started working with public schools. And I was a team of one person, then it became 10 people. Today it's 200 people that work at Taleemabad, serving about 200,000 children who um, are enrolled in Pakistan's public schools. And we also put up our stuff on broadcast television, reaching about 8.5 million children every week. Um, I think that it took quite a lot of internal barriers to cross. My first reaction was, why do Nadeem and Wasim don't go to school? I mean, something must be wrong with their parents. They're making the wrong choices. But I think it took me auditing my own privilege to realize that it wasn't, in fact, anybody's fault. I think that they were invisible costs that stopped their parents from sending them to school. Then my second big assumption was that this would take lots of time and energy, and it would have a really complex organizational setup. But I remember the first step was just giving my time, showing up at the village every single day. And I think that snowballs faster than any other thing that I've seen. And I think the third thing that I did was I remember standing in the school 8 a.m. on the first day and having no kid show up and becoming really infuriated that I'd done this whole thing and nobody was coming. And then ultimately realizing after a week of being really disappointed that it was me who was at fault and I needed to design for the margins. And that ended up being, we converted the school into an evening school. We started doing lots of hands-on stuff, and you know many of the kids have now pulled their families out of poverty and hold down jobs in companies across Pakistan. And so my invitation to you is that I think rebellion can be a big thing, but more often than not it's a small choice that you keep on repeating that snowballs into huge amounts of change. And so what is one tiny choice that everyone can make today that will snowball later on?